They said I would
I
never
have
matter,
waited for
not
this
in those
moment.
exact words.
And I have
The Empire
dreamed
was
of
far
it.
too polite for honesty. They said it in the way a Lord's eyes would pass over me in a corridor, the way my name appeared on no records, the way my father worked for 38 years and died on a floor no one bothered to repair. My name is Thalia, and this is the story of how I learned that mattering and existing are two entirely different things. It starts where everything starts. With blood on stone and a little girl who didn't understand yet that some deaths are paperwork and some deaths are tragedies, and the difference has nothing to do with the dying and everything to do with who's left behind. The floor was slick. That's what I remember most. Not the sound of my father's skull hitting the iron drainage grate. Not the way his hand reached for something that wasn't there. Not even the silence that came after the terrible absence of breath, in a space that had always been filled with his breathing. I remember the floor, wet, dark, the color of garnets in lamplight. My father's name was Aldrich. He cleaned the arena floors after the vampire lords finished their entertainments. 38 years of kneeling on stone, of scrubbing away what remained when immortal creatures remembered they still had teeth. They called him a blood servant. The term suggested service. It suggested choice. There was no choice, there was only survival, and the thin margin between useful and disposable, and my father understanding exactly which side of that margin we lived on. I was 12 years old, carrying 2 buckets of water when I found him. The wire handles had cut into my palms so deep I'd stopped feeling pain and started feeling temperature instead. Cold metal, hot blood, both at once the way contradictions live in your body before your mind learns to name them. I set the buckets down slowly. Water sloshed. The sound echoed in the empty corridor beneath the Scarlet Theater, bouncing off stone that had been standing for 300 years and would stand for 300 more, and none of it would remember my father. I walked to him. My shoes left prints in the wet, small feet, a child's feet, the kind of feet that shouldn't have to walk toward their father's body and understand with perfect clarity that he wasn't coming back from this. Papa, the word fell into the silence like a stone into deep water. It sank. It disappeared. I said it again louder because volume was the problem. Because if I could just be loud enough, he would hear me. He would wake up. He would tell me to stop shouting in the tunnels that sound carried that we needed to be quieter, smaller, less. Papa! 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 Nothing. The arena animals were pacing in their cages. Back and forth, claws clicking on stone in a rhythm that almost sounded peaceful if you didn't think about what it meant. My father had told me once when I was 7 and asked why they paced that it was because they remembered being somewhere else. The remembering wouldn't let them sit still. I knelt beside him in the wet and tried to hold his hand. His fingers wouldn't close around mine. The thing that made them close was gone. I stayed there until someone found us. I don't know how long. Time does something strange when the world breaks. It stops being a line and becomes a room. A small room with no windows. You sit in it with the thing that happened and there's no door, and the two of you just exist together in that space outside of minutes and hours. When they pulled me away from him, I wasn't crying. I want you to understand that. I wasn't crying because crying would have meant understanding, and I was 12 years old and I didn't understand it. I wouldn't understand it for years. I would carry it inside me like a stone I'd swallowed. Heavy, sharp-edged, sitting somewhere behind my ribs in the dark space between my lungs where I'd recently started keeping things. Things that were mine. Things no one could take. My father's death was the first thing I put there. The scar on my palm from the wire bucket handle was the second. I didn't know it then, but that scar would break me open 10 years later in a corridor with a man who had no business touching it. The Empire gave us 3 days, 38 years of service, every sunrise, every bucket, every floor scrubbed clean of what the Lords left behind. Not once did my father complain. Not a single time did he ask for anything except the chance to keep working, to keep his family housed, to keep us alive, in a world that considered our lives a courtesy and our deaths an inconvenience. 3 days to vacate the servants' quarters. I remember my mother in the doorway. Her name was Vesper, and she was the kind of beautiful that made other women's eyes harden and men's eyes follow. And when you had no rank and no protection, that kind of beautiful wasn't a gift. It was a target painted on your skin. She stood very still, her hands at her sides, fingers slightly curled, reaching for something that wasn't there anymore. Her lips were moving. No sound, she was counting. 3 days against everything we own. 3 days against 2 daughters and no income. 3 days against a world that had just subtracted the only man who stood between us in the street. The math didn't work. She knew it before she finished counting. I watched her face when she realized the exact moment the numbers came up short. Her whole body absorbed it, a small flinch barely visible, like a horse shying from a slap. Then nothing. She put the flinch away somewhere behind whatever wall she'd built over years of surviving things that should have broken her. I learned that from her. The putting away. She just didn't know I was watching when she taught me. My mother brought me into the work 2 years later. I was 14. She stood in front of me the morning of my first performance at the Scarlet Theater, and I could see it in her eyes. The grief of a mother handing her daughter a tool she wished didn't exist. "Listen to me," she said. Her hands cupped my face. Her palms were rough, calloused from gripping things too hard because letting go meant falling. "You smile, you perform, you read the room before you read the script. And when a vampire looks at you the wrong way, and they will Thalia, you make yourself smaller." She leaned close. Her breath smelled like the mint tea she drank to calm her hands. "Not because you are small, but because at the bottom being noticed means someone decides you're theirs." I nodded. I did not make myself smaller, but I never told her that. 10 years later, I stood on the same stage my mother had stood on 20 years before that. The Scarlet Theater smelled like sawdust and wine, and the particular desperation of people performing survival at volume. The crowds were drunk by the second act. They threw coins when they were happy, and harder things when they weren't. You learned to read the room before you learned the choreography, because the choreography determined how good the show was. Reading the room determined whether you went home walking. I was good at it, not from talent, from necessity. My mother's instincts, my father's stubbornness, and somewhere between the two, a mouth that moved faster than my brain could supervise. By 22, something had changed. Not me, the room. When I stepped onto that stage, 300 vampires went quiet. Not polite quiet. The arrested, held breath quiet of predators who have registered something in the space they don't understand. My mother called it presence. An old blood witch who watched our show twice called it something else. "You have presence, child," she'd said, her fingers on my arm like talons, her breath like fig of wine. "A gift can be stolen. Presence cannot." I kept that behind my ribs with the rest of the things that were mine. But here's what presence couldn't do. It couldn't give me blood, couldn't give me rank, couldn't change the 300-year-old law that said humans like me could entertain, could serve, could be useful in all the quiet, invisible ways the Empire needed someone to be useful. But we couldn't rise, couldn't be claimed, could absolutely not, under penalty of death, be claimed by vampire royalty. The law didn't care about my presence. It had decided my worth before my grandmother's grandmother drew breath. Every night when the performer's smile washed off and I lay in the dark, listening to my mother's controlled breathing, I told myself I'd accepted it. I was fine. I was not fine. I was so far from fine that fine was a country I'd heard about but never visited. But my mother's voice in my head said fine was the only address we could afford, so I moved in, unpacked, stayed. And behind my ribs, the collection grew. Every wound, every win, every night I disagreed with the Empire's verdict on my worth. Quietly, privately, doors shut. I kept it all. It was the only form of wealth available to me. After performances, I became someone else. Not better, not worse, just mine. The version of me on that stage was a tool, sharp, reliable, exhausting. She could hold 300 vampires in her hand and make them forget for 40 minutes that they were immortal and I was temporary. But she ate me alive. Every time I put her on, something underneath got thinner, worn, like fabric washed too many times, still holding together, but you could see light through it now. So the moment I cleared the backstage curtain, I dropped her. Let her fall to the stone floor with the sawdust and became the other one. The tired one. The hungry one. The one with a bruise on her ribs from where a drunk vampire had grabbed at her through the stage railing 3 nights ago. My corner was a stone ledge in a corridor that belonged to me by the only law the bottom recognized. Nobody had wanted it badly enough to take it. I had bread 2 days old. A book. Marcus Aurelius' Meditations, borrowed from a merchant's wife who'd looked at me with surprise when I asked, and then something else when she realized I could read. I had maybe 40 minutes before my mother found me with a list and the expression that said she knew I was hiding. 40 minutes, my whole kingdom. I sat, pulled my knees up, opened the book to a page I'd read 17 times. A dead emperor talking to himself about how to stay human when the world kept trying to make you something else. Every page felt like a letter addressed to me. Like Marcus had looked across 1,000 years and said, "Yes, you, the girl in the corridor with the hard bread and the bruised ribs. This is for you." 4 pages in, I heard footsteps. Everything backstage had a sound. Performers moved light and quick. Stage crew moved heavy and deliberate. Animal handlers shuffled the careful gait of people who lived their lives not startling things with teeth. These footsteps were none of those. Confident, unhurried. The sound of a man whose feet expected the ground to cooperate because every ground he'd ever walked on had. My body reacted before my brain caught up. Shoulders tightened. Hand moved, angling the book to cover more of my body. A reflex so old I didn't register it as fear. Just what my body did when a powerful vampire entered a space I was in. Made itself smaller. My mother's lesson written into my muscles before I was old enough to understand why. I didn't look up. The footsteps stopped. The public entrance is the other direction. My voice was steady. I was proud of my voice. Silence. Then quiet, precise with the diction of someone who selected words the way a surgeon selected instruments. I'm aware. I looked up. The corridor changed, not metaphorically, physically. The air shifted weight, heavier, denser, the atmospheric pressure that happened when certain vampires entered closed spaces. I'd felt it before in the back rows of the theater when the royal box filled. A pressure, a heat. Your ears didn't pop, but they wanted to. This was that except concentrated. Like the entire weather system was coming from one person. He was tall, dark clothing, no rank markers, which meant either he didn't need them or was smart enough to leave them off. Young, early 20s, a face that couldn't decide between severe and beautiful and had settled on both. And his eyes, dark, still, doing the reading thing. His gaze moved over me like fingers over a page taking information I hadn't agreed to give. But this wasn't the front row read. Those vampires read me like a menu. Options, prices. This vampire was reading me like a book, and he'd stopped on a page he wasn't expecting. He was looking at Marcus Aurelius. Then my face, then Marcus Aurelius again, like the equation didn't compute. You're lost, I said. I took a wrong corridor. That's what lost means. Something crossed his face, not a smile. That face wasn't built for smiling the way a fortress wasn't built for flower arrangements, but something adjacent, something that lived in the same neighborhood and occasionally visited. The exit is which direction? I pointed left without looking up. Thank you. You're welcome. He didn't move. I turned a page I hadn't read. My pulse was doing something in my throat I didn't like. Not a fear. I knew fear. Fear tasted like copper and made my hands cold. This was something else. Something that lived at fear's address but had a completely different front door. What are you reading? The question. The one noble vampires asked human performers with the exact tone of a man poking something unfamiliar with a stick. Can it read really a human? But I'd answered that question 100 times. Every time with the performer's smile. The one that cost me something each time I produced it. The toll. The tax. The piece of myself I handed over every time I pretended a condescending question was flattering. But the show was over. The performer was on the floor with the sawdust. This was my corridor. Something with words in it, I said. You should try it sometime. Silence. The kind that had weight. The kind you felt on your skin. My heart was slamming in my wrists, my throat behind my ears. Not because I was scared, though I should have been. Any human with survival instincts should have been terrified of any vampire noble in her corridor at 10 at night. My heart was slamming because I had just been rude to someone who could end my career. My housing, my mother's income, my sister's safety with a single word to a single person. I waited for the punishment. Instead, he laughed. Not the polished sound I'd heard from 1,000 nobles. Not the diplomatic chuckle of a man performing an amusement. A real laugh. Short, startled, involuntary. Like something had been locked inside his chest for a very long time, and my stupid, reckless sentence had found the key. It was the sound of a person being surprised by themselves. Brief and unguarded, it cracked his whole face open for 1 second, and then he closed it again, and the architecture went back up. But I had seen it. What was underneath the severe? Underneath the controlled? Underneath the face that made other vampires look at the floor? For 1 second, he was just a person laughing because something caught him off guard. I felt it land in my chest like a warm stone dropped into cold water. I looked up properly. He was looking at me the same way. Thalia, he said, my name in his mouth. When nobles said my name, it sounded like a label, a category. When he said it, it sounded like he'd been carrying it around and had finally arrived at the address where it belonged. Every nerve in my body fired, not with fear, with recognition. You know my name, I said. My voice was steady. I was extremely proud of my voice. Yes. I don't know yours. A pause. The pause of a man who understood names were weapons and he was about to hand me one. Lucien. The blood left my hands, not a metaphor. I felt it drain from my fingers the way water drains from a cracked cup. Fast, downward, leaving nothing behind but cold. Lucian Ravencroft, the Vampire King's heir, the next ruler of the most powerful court in the Empire. Standing in my corridor at 10 at night with a laugh still fading from his face that I had put there. Behind my ribs, the collection shifted. I didn't want it to, didn't give permission. There was no room. I had filled that space with iron and grief and the small, hard things that kept me alive. The warm, stupid thing shouldered its way in anyway. Made room. Settled. The exit is left, I said. Perfect voice. You said that. You're still here. He looked at me too long. A look with weight. I felt it in my sternum like bass through a wall. Not heard, absorbed. I am, he said, like it was an answer to a question I hadn't asked. Then he left. The corridor gave him back to the world. The air pressure returned to normal. The lamp flickered like nothing had happened. I sat on my ledge. My hands were shaking. Not with fear. These hands had been steady through my father's death, through years of hostile rooms, through every performance and every grab and every night I'd listened to my mother breathe in the dark. Shaking now over a laugh, over a name, over the way he'd said mine like it was something worth carrying. My mother's voice clear and immediate in my head. The fairy tale is the most dangerous thing they sell us, Thalia. More dangerous than the bruise. The fairy tale makes you open the door. I shut the voice down. Told myself firmly in the voice I used for decisions that needed to stay decided. No. But behind my ribs in the space that shouldn't have been there, the new thing sat. Warm. Patient. Like it had all the time in the world. I don't watch performers. Let me be clear about that from the beginning because it matters. I attend the Scarlet Theater because politics requires proximity. I sit in the royal box. I study the crowd. The real theater. Who leans toward whom? Which house sent their second son instead of their first? Which vampires laugh too loudly, which means they're afraid? Which are silent, which means they're either safe or about to make someone unsafe? I am 22 years old. I am heir to the oldest vampire throne in the Empire. I have ended 3 political careers without raising my voice because raising your voice tells the room you've run out of better weapons. I do not lose focus. I do not get distracted. I also do not think about the betrothal contract sitting in my study. The one my uncle's council arranged 8 months ago with House Crimson. The one bearing my seal and the signature of a woman I have met exactly twice and felt nothing for either time. Lady Morgane Crimson. Beautiful, intelligent, politically flawless. The blood binding ceremony is scheduled for the winter solstice, 4 months away. The binding is not a marriage. It's something older, something permanent. A vampire's blood intertwined with another's for eternity. You feel what they feel. You age as they age, which for us means never. You cannot lie to each other, you cannot hide, and you cannot break it. Not with divorce, not with death. The only way to dissolve a blood binding is to transfer it to another vampire, and even then both parties must consent. Morgane will not consent. Her house needs this alliance too desperately. My uncle needs it to secure the Eastern border treaties. The council needs it to prevent civil war with the old blood families who think I'm too young, too radical, too sympathetic to humans. Everyone needs this except me. I have been looking for a way out since the ink dried. I have found nothing. So I go to the theater. I watch the crowd. I do my duty. I do not watch the performers. Until the night I did. It happened like a dislocation, a joint popping out of alignment, sudden, mechanical. The wrongness of something that was in place a second ago and now isn't, and your whole body knows it. The crowd shifted. 300 vampires inhaled at the same time. A ripple, a current, something moving through the room like wind through grass. I looked down from the royal box to find the source. She was on the stage and I couldn't look away. I want to describe this clinically. I want the language of strategy and political assessment. I can't. She was not the most beautiful woman in the room. I registered that immediately because if beauty were the explanation, I could file it and move on. I have seen beauty. Beauty is presented to me at every function, like coursework. This was not beauty, this was weather. She moved on that stage and the atmosphere changed. 300 vampires drunk indifferent there for spectacle went still. Not polite stillness, pray stillness. The quiet of creatures who have registered something larger than themselves and have not yet decided what to do about it. She said something to the front row. I didn't hear it. I saw its effect. Noble vampires with bloodlines older than my family laughing like children. She had stripped them of their dignity in a sentence without raising her voice, without touching them. That is not a gift. That is power. And she didn't know she had it. That was the detail that took the observation from interesting to dangerous. She wielded it instinctively, the way a born swordsman wields a blade, without understanding the metallurgy, just the pure, devastating efficiency of someone designed for this. I knew what she was before I knew who she was. The clothing, functional, unadorned. The way the theater staff moved around her with the indifference the Empire reserved for people it had decided were furniture. Human, no rank, no house, no protection. Legally, socially, categorically impossible. More impossible than the woman I was contractually bound to and felt nothing for. More impossible than anything. I looked away, counted to 5, looked back. She was still there, still rearranging the room around herself without trying. Something behind my sternum shifted, not gently, the way a lock shifts when a key enters it. Mechanical, precise. Tumblers falling into position they were built for and have been waiting in the dark to reach. I thought, this is a problem. I was correct. It was the largest problem of my life. And somewhere in the same thought, involuntary and immediate, the Morgaine contract needs to end. Before this goes any further, I didn't yet understand what this was. I understood that it was already too late. Victor had her name by midday. Thalia, daughter of Aldrich, human, blood servant deceased. Workplace incident, unreported, uninvestigated. Mother alive. Vesper, former blood courtesan. Sister. Astrid, currently active on the stage. No bloodline, no rank, no house, no protection. Completely impossible. I read the report twice. On the second reading, I stopped at father deceased, workplace incident, unreported, uninvestigated. I sat with those words for a long time. Unreported, uninvestigated. Because he was human. Because his death wasn't worth the paperwork. Because the Empire had built a system where a man could work for 38 years, die on the job, and the response was 3 days eviction for his family. I folded the report, put it in the drawer next to the Morgaine contract. 2 documents. One that bound me to a political arrangement I felt nothing for. One that described a woman I had seen for 7 minutes and couldn't stop thinking about. The drawer was very small. Both of them took up all of it. I went back on Thursday, not because I'd made a decision, because I couldn't not go. The corridor was exactly where I'd left it. Stone, lamplight, the smell of old wood, and something else. Something that might have been hope if hope had a scent. She was there. Same ledge, same book, but different. Jaw set, left hand gripping the book instead of reading it. The posture of someone who'd been hurt recently and was still deciding whether to show it. I noticed. I have spent my life in rooms where the important thing is the thing being hidden. You found it, she said without looking up. The corridor. You weren't looking for the exit. No, I sat, the calculated distance, close enough to talk, far enough to deny. What happened to your neck? A decision, stillness, a woman choosing how much truth to release. Nothing. Thalia, nothing, that's your business. Show me. She looked at me with flat assessment, deciding whether to trust something dangerous. Why buy him? Because whoever left that mark is going to explain it to me. And depending on the explanation, they're going to stop, or they're going to have a problem significantly larger than anything they thought they were doing. Silence. She read me. I read her. 2 people with the same skill aimed at each other. She pulled back her collar. Purple. Black. The clear print of fingers. A hand. Fresh enough that the edges were still sharp. Something behind my sternum detonated, quietly. The architecture held. The controlled face. The measured breath. But behind it, something rearranged permanently around a single fact. Nobody was protecting her. The Empire that profited from her presence had built a system where a noble vampire could print his hand on her throat, and the response was nothing. Cassius, she said. Lord Cassius. He comes to the theater every week, backstage 3 nights ago. Cassius, House Crimson, allied with Morgaine's family. The same faction that wanted me locked into the blood binding. I looked at the bruise, at her face, at the way she held herself. Spine straight, chin up. She had survived this. She had survived everything, and no one had helped her. I handled it, she said. Threatened the merchant wives. He let go. It's not done, Thalia. It is for me. A noble vampire put his hands on you hard enough to mark you. That is not done. I reached out slowly, pulled her collar back into place. Gently. My fingertips brushed her skin. Warm. The bruise still swollen. Tender. The specific heat of damage the body was still processing. and underneath it her pulse. Fast, strong. The heartbeat of someone who was alive and had survived and was looking at me with an expression I would spend the rest of my life trying to deserve. I held the moment longer than necessary. She didn't pull away. Cassius will not touch you again, I said. You can't promise that. I don't make promises. I make arrangements. She looked at me for a long time. Something shifted between us. Not the electric charge. Something deeper. She had chosen to show me the mark. A human woman with a dead father and a philosopher's book and a collection of wounds behind her ribs. She had decided against every survival instinct she'd been trained since birth to obey, to trust me with the evidence of what this world did to women like her. That trust was the most valuable thing anyone had ever given me. More valuable than the Morgaine contract. More valuable than the throne. I was going to be worthy of it, or I was going to burn the architecture down trying. He came back every Thursday after that. Tuesdays too, when he could manage it. We talked. Hours. About everything and the specific nothing in between where the important things live. He told me about his uncle Valerian, how the old king had taught him that truth was the only currency that never lost its value. I told him about my mother, the courtesan work before she married my father, the performer's smile and what it kissed on. He went very quiet when I described the smile. You mean you perform being safe, he said slowly. You stand in front of vampires who could hurt you, and you smile so they choose not to. Every show since I was 14. Silence for a very long time. Then with the restraint of a man containing something large, you should not have to perform being safe. 7 words, the simplest possible arrangement of the simplest possible truth. Something behind my ribs shifted so hard I lost my breath. My mother's voice fainter now. They never are, Thalia. In the beginning, in the corridor, they never are. I heard her. I stayed anyway. It was raining the Saturday he took me to the palace gardens. Private entrance through Victor. A garden nobody used. Overgrown. Marble benches rain-stained to the color of old bone. Cypress trees pressing close enough to make the paths feel like tunnels. He walked through the rain toward me without hurrying, without covering his head. You're soaked, I said from the archway. Vampire kings don't run from weather. That's the most ridiculous thing you've ever said. We walked. He pointed out the mosaic path, a fountain that hadn't worked in 3 years because nobody dared tell Valerian it was broken. I pointed out things too, the way rain made the stones smell like the theater after morning wash. Iron and clean, the freshness of violence being rinsed away. The way the cypress branches moved like arms reaching for something they couldn't catch. He stopped walking. You see everything differently. I see everything from the bottom. The view is different when you've spent your life looking up. The rain got harder. We turned to go back. My foot went out from under me. Wet stone. The same kind of wet stone that killed my father. My body knew it before my brain did. The lurch. The loss of ground. The half second of free fall where your stomach lifts and your hands reach for anything solid. His arm caught me around my waist. Fast. The reflexes of a man trained to react before he thought. My back against his chest. His arm a band of heat across my ribs. The rain falling on both of us. I could feel him. Every inch, the solid wall of his body behind mine. The pressure of his arm across my stomach. The heat of him bleeding through my soaked clothing into my skin. His breath against my temple. Warm. Fast. The breathing of someone whose body had moved before his carefully constructed restraint could stop it. He held on 2 seconds longer than necessary. I know because I counted. Not consciously. My body counted. Registered the exact moment the grip shifted from catching to holding. From necessary to chosen. 2 seconds. Then he released me. Stepped back. The distance reassembled itself. The architecture went back up. Neither of us mentioned it. But that night, lying in my bed in the dark, I could still feel it. The specific pressure of his arm across my ribs. The heat of his chest against my spine. The 2 seconds. Behind my ribs, the warm thing grew. The library was 300 years of accumulated thought pressed between leather covers. It smelled like something sweet I couldn't name. Old paper, time itself if time had a scent. I didn't speak for 20 minutes. Just walked the shelves. Hands behind my back, eyes moving so fast they ached. Running my gaze over spines the way a starving person runs their eyes over a table of food. He watched me from a chair by the window. You're looking at me, I said without turning. Nothing in this room is more interesting than you right now. My heart performed an emergency evacuation of my chest. You can't say things like that. I set it to the shelf because looking at him while he said things like that was a structural risk. We agreed to be careful. We agreed to be careful, he said. We did not agree to be dishonest. And I'm finding the careful and the honest increasingly unable to share a sentence. I pulled a book from the shelf, held it against my chest. Armor, the only kind I had. There's a difference between honest and survived, I said. I choose what gets past the ribs. That's how I've stayed alive since I was 12. And right now you keep saying true things, and every true thing knocks on the wall, and the wall is thin, getting thinner, and I don't know what happens when it goes. He stood, crossed the library, stopped 2 feet from me. I need you to hear this, he said quietly. You have been carrying everything alone since you were 12 years old, and I am asking you to let me take some of the weight. You can't carry it for me. No, but I can carry it with you. I looked at him through tears I wasn't wiping. Why, my voice cracked. Because you showed me the bruise, he said, and the scar. And the father who died on a floor nobody fixed. And the pacing animals who can't sit still because the remembering won't let them. And the performer's smile that costs you something every time. He stepped closer. You showed me everything the world did to you, Thalia, and none of it made me want to leave. All of it made me want to stay. Behind my ribs, the last load-bearing wall came down, not with a crash, with a breath. And on the other side of it, standing exactly where he said he'd be patient and certain and holding nothing back, was him. The following Tuesday, the quarter. Late. We'd been talking for 3 hours. I was tired in the way you get tired when you've been honest for too long. Wrung out. Empty. The particular exhaustion of a person who has been carrying walls and has set them down temporarily. My head drifted, landed on his shoulder. I didn't mean for it to happen. My body just went toward the warmth. Toward the solid thing beside me that had been there for weeks without pushing or pulling or doing anything except being exactly where it said it would be. I felt him go still. Not tense. The opposite. A deliberate loosening. The specific decision of a man who has just received something fragile and is arranging his body to hold it without disturbing it. His shoulder adjusted slightly, making room for my head, a micro-movement. The kind of thing you could dismiss as nothing if you wanted to. I didn't want to. I wanted to notice it. I wanted to catalog every detail of what it felt like to lean against someone and have them lean back. I fell asleep. I know this because I woke up and his hand was in my hair, not stroking, just resting. His fingers threaded through the strands near my temple, his palm warm against the side of my head, like he'd put it there to keep me close, like he was afraid the sleep would end and he'd lose this version of me, the unguarded one, the one without walls, the one he couldn't get to when I was awake. I didn't move. I lay there with my eyes barely open, my head on his shoulder, his hand in my hair, and I felt the specific devastating weight of being held by someone who didn't know I was awake. Tenderness. That's the word. Not careful, not gentle, tender. The tenderness of a man who had spent 22 years being the hardest thing in every room and was now in a backstage corridor at 2 a.m. with nobody watching being soft. For me, his thumb moved once, a small stroke against my temple, testing whether I was asleep. I almost broke, not into tears, into him. I almost turned my face up and found his mouth and ended the pretense entirely. Every nerve in my body was screaming to move, upward, toward, into, to close the distance between his lips and mine and burn the careful space to the ground. I didn't move. I lay still and I let him hold me and I memorized the feeling. The weight of his hand, the warmth of his shoulder, the way his breathing slowed when he thought I was asleep, like my unconsciousness gave him permission to stop performing control. I memorized all of it, put it behind my ribs where it would live for the rest of my life. Then I opened my eyes. He looked down, saw that I was awake, started to pull his hand back. I caught his wrist. "Tell me to stop," he whispered. His voice was rough, something in it I'd never heard before. Not the controlled diplomat, not the future king, just a man who wanted something he shouldn't want and was asking permission to keep wanting it anyway. "Stop," I said. He started to move away. I tightened my grip on his wrist. I didn't mean it. The careful space collapsed, the heat coming off him, atmospheric pressure, the weight in the air that meant vampire royalty, but I wasn't afraid of it anymore. That was the terrifying part. The pressure that used to make my body go small had stopped meaning danger. It had started meaning him. "Thalia," he said, my name like a warning. "Tell me to stop," I whispered back, and I kissed him. Not soft, not tentative, like something I'd been holding back for weeks, that had stopped asking permission. He made a sound against my mouth, low, between a groan and a word, something I felt in my chest like a bass note. His hand moved from my hair to my face, cupping my jaw, tilting my head back, kissing me like the door I'd been looking for wasn't a door at all. It was this, the corridor and the lamp and his mouth on mine, and the wall coming down in a single long exhale. When we finally broke apart, foreheads together, breathing hard, he said it. The thing I'd been waiting for. The thing I'd been dreading. It's too late. What? To stop this. It's already too late. And I knew he was right. We had crossed something. Some invisible line drawn by centuries of law and common sense, and my mother's warnings. We were on the other side of it now. There was no going back. Victor came to find me 3 days later, not in the corridor, in the small room behind the stage where the performers changed costumes. His face had the expression of a man delivering news that would either save everything or destroy it. There's something you need to know, he said, before you make any decisions. He told me about the Morgaine contract. Not a marriage, Marie, a blood binding 8 months old, signed, bearing Lucien's seal and Morgaine's signature. A ceremony scheduled for the winter solstice. Eternal, unbreakable except by death or transference and only if both parties consent. Morgaine will never consent. I listened. I did not react. The performer was useful for something after all. He's been trying to dissolve it, Victor said quietly, for months, since before he met you. The paperwork is on his desk. He was going to tell you tonight. But he didn't tell me before, I said. My voice was ice. For 6 weeks of Tuesdays and Thursdays and Saturdays, in a garden in the rain, in a library where he put his hands on mine and told me he wasn't leaving. For all of that, he had a signed contract in his study with another woman's name on it. Victor looked at the floor. Yes. Why are you telling me? Because he was going to tell you tonight. And you deserve to hear it when you're alone, when you have time to feel it. Not in front of him, where the feeling has to compete with his face and his voice and the fact that he loves you. Victor said the last part quietly. And when he says it, you will believe him. And believing him while angry is harder than believing him while calm. I sat on the dressing room bench. Victor left. I sat there for a very long time. My mother's voice. Not screaming, not warning, just quiet, just there. The way she'd been there my whole life. The steady, exhausted presence of a woman who had lived through loving and losing. I sat with that for hours. The lamp burned low. The city moved outside. And I thought about the differences. Because there were differences. And the differences mattered. Lucien came back. Every time. Without fail. Lucien had been actively trying to dissolve the contract. Victor confirmed it. The paperwork was real. Lucien was fighting for a way out. Different. But still the bruise of not knowing. Still the specific familiar ache of discovering that the person you trusted had been managing a reality you weren't invited into. I knew what my mother would say. I knew what every survival instinct I'd built since I was 12 would say. Walk away. The door is still closable. The wall can go back up. I sat on that bench and I waited. Not because I had forgiven him, because I needed to see his face when he told me. I needed to know in my body, not just my mind, whether this vampire was worth the risk. He came at 10, different energy, faster, urgent, the gait of a man who had made a decision and was coming to deliver it. He sat beside me on the ledge, looked at me. I saw it before he opened his mouth, in the set of his jaw, in the way his hands were clenched on his knees. He was going to tell me. There's something I need to... The Morgaine contract, I said. He went white, actually white, like the blood had left his face entirely. Victor, he said. Yes. Silence. The heaviest silence we'd ever shared. Heavier than the first night. Heavier than the bruise. Heavier than anything. I was coming to tell you, he said. You were coming to tell me tonight, after 6 weeks of not telling me. Yes, he didn't flinch, didn't deflect, didn't perform regret, just the truth. Stated plainly, the way I'd asked him to be from the beginning. I should have told you sooner, he said. I was trying to dissolve it. I thought if I could end it before it became relevant. It was always relevant. My voice was steady, cold. The performer's voice, the one I hadn't used with him in weeks. Every time you sat on this ledge and told me you weren't leaving, there was a document in your study that said otherwise. He looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen on him before. Not the architecture, not the control. Fear. The future vampire king was afraid of losing a human woman in a corridor. You're right, he said. I managed it instead of telling you. I made the decision for both of us. And that's the same thing I told you I would never do. Yes, the contract will be dissolved, he said. My uncle is reviewing the paperwork tonight. It will be done within the week. That's not the point. I know it's not the point. The point is that I need to be able to trust you. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a folded document, put it on the ledge between us, the contract, Morgane's signature, his seal, 8 months old. Then he reached in again. Another document, the dissolution request, Valerian's notes in the margins. He put them side by side. Every drawer, he said quietly, every document, every decision, I'm giving you access to all of it. Not because you demanded it, because you're right. And I will not be the vampire who manages your life from a study you can't enter. I looked at the documents, at his face, at the fear still visible underneath the architecture. You should have told me, I said. Yes. This is the last time you manage something that involves me without telling me. Yes. If there's another drawer, another document, another reality I don't have access to, there isn't. If there ever is, there won't be. I looked at him for a long time. Then I picked up the Morgane contract, folded it, put it behind my ribs with everything else. Not the warm thing, not the grief, the evidence, the proof that he had been wrong and had chosen to make it right and had put that proof in my hands rather than asking me to trust what I couldn't see. My uncle wants to meet you, he said. I know. How do you, Victor? He almost smiled. Victor is going to be the death of me. Victor is the reason I'm still sitting on this ledge, I said. Because he gave me time to be angry alone. And being angry alone was the only thing that kept me from leaving before you got here. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he leaned forward and kissed me. Soft this time. Careful, like I was something breakable he'd almost lost. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against mine. Whatever happens tomorrow, he said. Whatever my uncle says, whatever the council does, I need you to know something. Lucien, I am not leaving, he whispered against my hair. My throat closed. I know, I said. But behind my ribs, my mother's voice whispered one last warning. They all say that, Talia. In the beginning, in the corridor, when it's just the two of you and the lamp and the feeling. They all say they're not leaving until the morning comes. In morning, my darling girl always comes. My mother stood in the doorway of our small room with the morning light behind her, and for a moment she looked exactly like she had 24 years ago. Young, hopeful, the kind of beautiful that made men stupid and women cautious. Then she stepped forward, and the light caught her face properly, and I saw what the years had done. The lines around her eyes, the gray threading through her dark hair, the way her hands shook slightly in the mornings, now the same way my father's had. She was 45 years old. She looked 60. That's what survival at the bottom does. It ages you in ways that have nothing to do with time and everything to do with the weight of carrying yourself through a world that would prefer you didn't exist. You've been seeing him, she said. Not a question, a statement. I was folding costumes. My hands didn't stop moving. I don't know what you mean. Thalia, the way she said my name, the exact tone mothers use when they know you're lying and they're giving you one chance to stop. I put the costume down. Yes. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, the expression was the worst thing I'd ever seen. Recognition. The face of a woman who had once been young and beautiful and at the bottom, who had once been in a corridor with a vampire who looked at her like she mattered. His name, she said quietly, Lucien Ravencroft. The king's heir. Yes. She sat down on my bed, slowly, like her knees had stopped working properly. I need to tell you something, she said. Something I should have told you years ago. But I was afraid that telling you would make it real again, and I've spent 24 years trying to make it not real. She looked at her hands, turned them over, studied the lines on her palms like they were a map to somewhere she'd been before and never wanted to go back to. His name was Damon, she said. Demon Shadowmere. Vampire, pure blood, very old, very powerful. My heart stopped. I was 19, working the blood courts. You know what that means. I don't need to explain it to you. She didn't, I knew. The blood courts were where vampires went to feed in public, where humans offered their necks for money, where the line between service and something else got very thin very fast. He came every week, same night, same table. He never fed from the courtesans, just watched. I thought that made him different, better. Her voice was flat. The flatness of someone reciting facts they've memorized to keep the feelings at a distance. One night he asked me to sit with him. We talked. He was kind, intelligent. He asked about my life like he actually cared about the answer. I knew this story. I'd lived this story. I was living it right now. 3 months, she said. We met in secret. He said things to me. Beautiful things. He said I was extraordinary. He said he'd never met anyone like me. He said he wanted to turn me, make me vampire, give me forever. She looked up at me. I believed him, Thalia, every word, because I was 19 and in love, and he was offering me a way out of a life that was killing me slowly. What happened? I got pregnant with you. The room went very quiet. I didn't know what to do. I was terrified, so I told him. I thought he'd be happy. I thought we'd figure it out together. Her voice cracked. He left. That night, no explanation, no goodbye, just gone. Like I'd imagined the whole thing. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. 2 months later, I met your father, Aldrich. He was a blood servant, bottom of the bottom, no rank, no prospects. But he was kind. And when I told him I was pregnant with another man's child, he said it didn't matter. He said he'd love you like you were his. And he did. For 22 years he did. I couldn't breathe. But here's the part I never told anyone, she said. Demon came back. The heir left the room 13 years ago. You were 9. Your father was still alive. Demon appeared at the theater. Same face, hadn't aged a day. He said he'd made a mistake. He said he'd been afraid of the responsibility of tying himself to a human, of what his family would think. He said he'd regretted it every day for 13 years. She looked at me with wet eyes. He offered me eternal life, Thalia, right there. He would turn me. We could be together. Forever. I could stop aging, stop dying. I could have everything I'd wanted when I was 19. What did you say? I said no. Silence. I said no because I loved your father. Because he'd been there. Because he'd raised you like you were his blood, and Diamond had been nothing but an absence. Because choosing forever with a vampire who left meant abandoning a man who stayed. Her hands were shaking now. Your father died 10 years ago, and every single day since I've wondered if I chose wrong. I stared at her. I wake up at night, Thalia. I'm 45 and I look 60, and I'm going to die soon. Maybe 10 years. Maybe 20 if I'm lucky. And Damon is still out there somewhere looking exactly like he did when I was 19. He'll look like that when I'm dust. When you're dust. When your children are dust. She grabbed my hands. That's what you're signing up for. You love him now. Fine. Beautiful. I believe you. I believe he loves you too. But you're human, Thalia. You're going to age. You're going to get sick. You are going to die. And he's going to stay exactly as he is right now, young. Beautiful. Eternal. Her voice broke completely. And one day, maybe 50 years from now, maybe 60 if you're very lucky, you're going to be an old woman in a bed, and he's going to be holding your hand, and you're going to see it in his eyes. See what? Relief, she whispered. Relief that it's finally over, that he can move on, that the human he loved is finally mortal in the way mortals are supposed to be. Temporary. I pulled my hands away. Lucian isn't demon. They're all demon, she said. That's what you don't understand. It's not about the individual vampire. It's about the math. They live forever. We don't. That's not a problem love can solve. It's a problem time solves by taking us away and leaving them behind. She stood up. I'm not telling you to stop seeing him. You're 22. You're going to do what you're going to do. I did. She walked to the door, stopped. I'm telling you that the fairy tale has a second half. The part they don't put in stories. The part where the princess grows old and the prince doesn't. And she spends her last 30 years watching him pretend he doesn't notice. She left. I sat on my bed in the morning light and felt my mother's regret settle over me like a shroud. Behind my ribs, the warm thing that had been glowing for 6 weeks flickered. Not out, but dimmer. My uncle's study smelled like old leather and older blood. Valerian Ravencroft sat behind a desk that had been standing in that exact spot for 300 years. He was reading when I entered. Didn't look up. That was Valerian, making you wait, reminding you that his time was valuable and yours was negotiable. I stood there for 5 minutes before he closed the book. Sit. I sat. He looked at me the way you look at a puzzle you're trying to solve. Not hostile, not warm, just assessing. Victor tells me you want to dissolve the Morgaine contract. Yes. Victor tells me it's because of a human woman. Yes. Victor tells me you're in love with her. I met his eyes. Yes. He leaned back in his chair. It creaked. Everything in this room was old enough to creak. Tell me about her. Her name is Thalia. She's 22, human. Her father was a blood servant who died in a workplace accident that was never investigated because his life wasn't worth the paperwork. Valerian's expression didn't change. She reads philosophy. She has more intelligence in her left hand than most of the vampire nobles I negotiate with have in their entire houses. She's been performing survival since she was 14 years old, and she's done it with more dignity than I've seen from anyone born to power. And you want to claim her? I want to spend the rest of my life with her. That's not the same thing. I know. Valerian stood, walked to the window, looked out at the city, the sprawl of Nocturna beneath us. 300 years of vampire rule stretched out in stone and shadow. I loved a human once, he said quietly. I went very still. Her name was Isolde. I was young, very young, barely 40. She was 17, human, servant in the palace. She had this laugh, this light. She made me feel like I was something other than a title and a bloodline. He didn't turn around. I turned her, against the law, against every warning. I thought love was enough. I thought if I just loved her hard enough, the turning would take and she'd keep her soul and we'd have forever. What happened? She became a thrall. The word hit the room like a stone. Thralls were what happened when vampires turned humans wrong, when the blood didn't take properly, when the soul got lost in the transition. They looked alive. They moved. They followed commands. But they weren't people anymore. They were dolls wearing human skin. I kept her for 3 months, Valerian said. His voice was completely flat now. I told myself she'd come back, that it was temporary, that the Isolde I loved was still in there somewhere. Was she? No. He turned to face me. I killed her myself, took her to the cliffs outside the city, held her while the sun came up. We burned together. I healed. She didn't. I couldn't speak. The law forbidding vampires from claiming humans exists because of me, Lucian. Because I loved a girl and turned her into a thing, and then I had to destroy that thing because keeping it alive was an obscenity. He walked back to his desk. So when you tell me you want to claim a human woman, I hear you asking permission to repeat the worst mistake of my life. There's a difference. What difference? I'm not asking to turn her. I'm asking to be with her as she is. For how long? As long as she lives. 50 years, Valerian said. 60 if you're lucky. 70 if you're very lucky. And then what? And then I'll have had 50 years with her. And then you'll have 500 years without her. I know. He leaned forward. Do you understand what that means? You'll watch her age. You'll watch her body fail. You'll watch her die. And you'll still be here, looking exactly as you do right now. And every woman you see for the next 5 centuries will be measured against her. And none of them will measure up, because she'll be the one you couldn't keep. I don't care. You will. No, I said, I won't, because the alternative is not having her at all. And I've already lived that for 22 years before I met her, and it was empty. It was duty and strategy and managing other people's expectations. It was being the best approximation of a king I could perform. But it wasn't living. I stood up. She makes me human again, Uncle. For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm not just a function of the bloodline. I feel like I'm a person. And I will take 50 years of that over 500 years of the empty thing I was before. Valerian looked at me for a long time. There is another option, he said quietly. What option? The true love's bond. I'd heard of it. Everyone had. It was vampire legend, myth, the kind of story grandmothers told to make the children believe in magic. It's not real. It's rare, Valerian said. Not the same thing as not real. He pulled a book from the shelf behind him. Old. The kind of old that made 300 years look recent. The true love's bond is a turning ritual, but it's different from a normal turning. In a normal turning, the vampire takes the human's blood and replaces it with their own. The human becomes vampire, immortal, but they lose something in the process, humanity, soul, whatever you want to call it. He opened the book. The true love's bond requires sacrifice. The vampire gives up their immortality during the turning. They pour it into the human. If the bond is true, if the love is real, the human becomes vampire but keeps their soul. They become something new, something that's never existed before. And if it's not true, both die. The words sat in the air between us. Both, I said. Yes, the vampire loses their immortality and doesn't regain it. The human receives a vampire's power, but their body can't contain it. They burn from the inside, both dead within minutes. How many times has it been attempted? I don't know. The records are old, unclear, but I know of one successful bond in the last 300 years. Who? He looked at me strangely. That's not important. What's important is that you understand the risk. If you attempt this, if you're wrong about her, if the love isn't what you think it is, you'll kill her. And you'll die with her. I sat back down. Tell me the rest. There is no rest. That's it. You bite her. You give her everything. Your immortality, your power, your blood. If the bond is true, she survives and becomes vampire with her soul intact. If it's not, you both die. What about Morgaine? Bang. What about her, the blood binding? If I die, does it transfer to her? No, it dies with you. She'd be free. I thought about that. But there's a problem, Valerian said. What problem? The council. If I change the law to allow you to claim Thalia, every vampire noble with a human fascination is going to want the same privilege. We'll have chaos. Blood bonds, thralls, deaths. So don't change the law. Then how? Make it a test. If someone wants to claim a human, they have to prove the love is real. They have to risk the true love's bond. If they survive, the claim is valid. If they don't, the problem solves itself. Valerian stared at me. You're asking me to institute a law that could kill vampire nobles. I'm asking you to institute a law that protects humans from becoming thralls. If a vampire isn't willing to risk death for a human, they don't love them. They want them. There's a difference, Amiram. He was quiet for a very long time. You'd really do it, he said finally. You'd risk the true love's bond, risk both your deaths. Yes. Even knowing you could be wrong, that what you feel might not be enough. I'm not wrong. How do you know? Because she showed me her bruises, I said quietly, and her scars, and her father's death, and the performer's smile that costs her something every time she produces it. She showed me everything the world did to her, and I didn't want to fix it or save her or make it go away. I just wanted to be there, to carry some of the weight, to make the next 40 years less heavy than the last 22. I looked at him. That's not wanting, uncle. That's love. Valerian closed the book. The council meets tomorrow night. I'll present your case. But Thalia needs to be there. They need to see her. See you together. Decide if this is real or if you've lost your mind, but she'll be there. Lucien, he said as I reached the door, this is going to cost you, even if the bond works, even if she survives. The council is going to fight this. The old blood families are going to see it as an insult. You'll make enemies. I know. Are you prepared for that? I'm prepared to defend her, I said, from anyone, including you. He almost smiled. Good, because if you're going to do this, you need to mean it. Halfway gets you both killed. I left his study and went to find Thalia. I needed to tell her about the bond. I needed to ask her if she'd risk death for forever. I needed to know if she'd choose me over safety. But when I got to the theater, Victor was waiting. His face told me everything before he opened his mouth. She's gone, he said. The council chamber was exactly what I expected. Stone, high ceilings, torches burning in sconces that had been burning for 300 years. Vampires in formal dress standing in clusters, their voices low, their eyes sharp. They looked at me when I entered, not with curiosity, with assessment. The way you look at a problem you need to solve or a threat you need to eliminate. Lucien was already there, standing near the front. He saw me and his whole body changed. Relief, then confusion. I wasn't supposed to be here yet. We'd planned to arrive together, but I changed the plan because my mother's voice wouldn't stop, because I'd lain awake all night thinking about 50 years versus forever, because I'd realized that the only way to free him was to free him completely. I walked to the center of the chamber. Lord Cassius was there, third row. He looked at me and his eyes widened. Then he looked away. Good. Let him remember what happened when he put his hands on me. Valerian stood at the front of the chamber. He looked at me, then at Lucien, then back at me. Thalia, he said, we weren't expecting you until... I need to make a statement, I said. My voice carried, clear, steady. The performer's voice, except this time I meant every word. I know why you're here, I said to the room. Lucien Ravencroft wants to claim me, a human. He wants to break 300 years of law to be with someone who has no blood, no rank, no house, no right to stand in this room. Murmurs, nods. I'm here to tell you he's made a mistake. The room went silent. Lucien moved forward. Thalia, what are you? I held up my hand. He stopped. I am not worthy of a claim, I said. Not by vampire law, not by any reasonable standard. I'm a performer. My father cleaned your floors. My mother sold her blood. I have nothing to offer except the certainty that choosing me will cost him everything. I looked at Lucien, his throne, his alliances, his future, everything he's been preparing for his entire life. I turned back to the council. So I'm making this simple. I withdraw consent. He cannot claim me if I do not consent to be claimed. The problem is solved. Lucien's face had gone white. No, he said, yes. Thalia, you don't understand what you're— I understand perfectly, I said. You have a blood binding with Lady Morgaine. That binding cannot be dissolved, only transferred. You need a vampire to take the binding from you, someone willing to bind themselves to her in your place. I looked at Morgaine. She was standing near the back. Beautiful. Perfect. Everything I wasn't. I'm offering a trade, I said to her. Take me as your blood servant. Permanent contract. Full ownership. I'll serve your house for the rest of my life. Gasps. Movement in the crowd. In exchange, you transfer the blood binding. You release Lucien. He's free. You get a servant who knows the palace, knows the theater can be useful in ways that a random human cannot. Morgaine stared at me. Why would I do that? She said. I have the heir to the throne bound to me. Why would I trade that for a human servant? Because the heir to the throne doesn't love you, I said quietly, and everyone in this room knows it. You can keep the binding, but you'll spend eternity tied to a man who wishes you were someone else, every moment, every thought, every feeling. You'll know because the binding shows everything. I stepped closer to her. Or you can take the servant, use her. She's young, she's healthy, she'll last decades, and you'll be free to find someone who actually wants you. Morgaine's jaw tightened. You're offering to enslave yourself. Yes. For him. Yes. She looked at Lucien, then at me, then at the council. I accept, she said. No. Lucien's voice cut through the chamber. No, Thalia, you can't. It's done, Morgaine said. She pulled a contract from her dress, handed it to me. Sign. I took it, read it. Standard blood servant contract. Permanent. No termination clause. I would belong to House Crimson until I died. I signed. Morgaine took the contract, bit her wrist, let her blood fall on the signature. The binding activated. I felt it immediately. A weight around my throat. Not physical, magical. The contract settling into my bones. Thalia, Lucien was moving toward me. Victor caught him, held him back. Morgaine smiled, pulled a collar from her pocket. Silver, etched with her house crest. She fastened it around my neck. There, she said. Now the binding transfers. I felt it happen. The blood connection between Lucien and Morgaine severed, snapped like a cord cut with scissors. Lucien gasped, fell to his knees, free. He was free, and I was collared. Morgaine looked at me with cold satisfaction. Welcome to House Crimson's servant. You start immediately. She turned to the council. The problem is solved. The heir is free. The human is claimed by a house that knows how to manage her kind. We're done here. She walked toward the exit, stopped, looked back at me. Come. I looked at Lucien one last time. He was still on his knees, staring at me, devastated. I wanted to go to him. I wanted to tell him this was right, that he'd be a great king, that he'd find someone suitable, someone who could stand beside him without destroying everything he'd built. But Morgaine was waiting, and the collar was tight. I followed her out. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Thalia was gone. She'd enslaved herself to free me. The blood binding was broken. I could feel the absence where Morgaine's presence had been for 8 months. A weight lifted, a connection severed. I was free, and she was gone. Victor helped me up. I shoved him away. Why didn't you stop her? She didn't tell me she was coming. She went straight to Morgaine, made the offer before I knew what was happening. Valerian was beside me. Lucien, don't. Listen to me. She enslaved herself, my voice echoed off the stone. She gave up her freedom, her life, everything, and you all just stood there and watched. She made a choice, Valerian said quietly. A legal choice. The contract is binding. There's nothing. I'll break it. You can't. Blood servant contracts are permanent. Only death terminates them. Then I'll kill Morgaine. Then you'll be executed for murdering a noble. I looked at him. I don't care. Yes, you do, because if you're executed, who protects Thalia Morgaine's heir will inherit the contract, and they'll punish her for your crime. Is that what you want? I couldn't answer. He was right. Killing Morgaine would only make it worse. There is one option, Victor said quietly. We both looked at him. Trial by combat, old law. If someone wants to claim a contracted servant from another house, they can challenge the house for ownership. Combat. Winner takes the servant. Morgaine won't accept, Valerian said. She will if the king orders it, Victor said. Old law supersedes house law. If Lucian formally challenges and the king validates the challenge, she has to accept or forfeit the contract entirely. Valerian looked at me. You'd have to fight her champion. House Crimson will choose their strongest fighter. I don't care. If you lose the contract, stays with Morgaine, and you'll be banned from ever challenging again. I won't lose. And if you win, Valerian said slowly, you'll own Thalia's contract. She'll be your blood servant, legally, permanently. Is that what you want, to own her? I want to free her. Blood servant contracts can't be terminated except by death. Then I'll find a way. Valerian studied me for a long moment. All right, he said. I'll validate the challenge. You have 3 days to prepare. Morgaine will choose her champion. You'll fight at the next full moon. 3 days. Blood combat takes time to arrange. Witnesses, formalities, magic to ensure fairness. Thalia will be with Morgaine for 3 days. Yes. I wanted to destroy something. Someone. I wanted to burn House Crimson to the ground and take her back by force. But that would only get her killed. Arrange it, I said. Valerian nodded to Victor. They left. I stood in the empty council chamber and felt the weight of what she'd done. She'd saved me by destroying herself. She'd looked at an impossible situation and chosen the fourth option, one I hadn't even considered. Sacrifice herself so I could be free. I was going to get her back. I was going to win that combat. And then I was going to spend the rest of my life being worthy of what she'd given up. House Crimson was everything I expected. Cold, beautiful, designed to make you feel small. Morgaine led me through corridors of polished marble and mirrors. Servants moved through the shadows. Silent, efficient, wearing the same collar I now wore. She stopped at a door, opened it. This is your room. I looked inside. A bed, a small window, stone walls, a cell with better lighting. You'll serve at meals. You'll clean the main hall. You'll do whatever I or my household requires. You speak when spoken to. You do not leave the grounds. You do not contact anyone outside this house. She stepped closer. Especially not Lucian Ravencroft. I didn't answer. Do you understand? Yes. Yes what? Yes, my lady. She smiled, not warmly. Good, you're smarter than you look. She turned to leave, stopped. You really think you saved him, she said. Don't you? You think you set him free? I didn't answer. You didn't save him, she said quietly. You just gave him something to regret. He'll spend the next 300 years thinking about you, wondering what would have happened if you'd chosen differently, if you'd been brave enough to stay. I was brave enough. No, she said. You were afraid of aging, afraid of dying, afraid of being the temporary thing in his eternal life. So you ran. You just ran toward a pig instead of away from him. She walked to the door. Get some rest. You start serving breakfast at dawn. The door closed. The lock turned. I sat on the bed and felt the collar tight around my throat. She was right. I'd been afraid. Not of Lucien, of time. Of watching him stay young while I got old. Of seeing the moment in his eyes when I stopped being the woman he loved and started being the woman he'd loved. Past tense. I'd traded 50 years of that fear for permanent servitude. And I didn't know if I'd chosen right. Behind my ribs, the warm thing that had been glowing for 6 weeks went out. Not dimmed. Out. I lay down on the bed. I didn't cry. My mother's lesson. You cry at home. You cry in the dark. But this was home now, and it was already dark. So I cried. I found her on the 3rd day. Morgaine's estate, East Wing, servants' quarters. I wasn't supposed to be there. Victor had arranged a distraction, a delivery to the main house that required Morgaine's attention. I had maybe 10 minutes. I found her room, knocked. Silence. I pushed the door open. She was standing at the window, back to me, collar visible above her dress, silver, crimson house crest. She didn't turn around. You need to leave, she said quietly. No. Lucian, if Morgaine finds you here, I don't care. I do. The contract says I'm not allowed contact with you. If she finds out, she'll punish me. I'm getting you out of here. You can't. Trial by combat. 3 days from now, I'm challenging House Crimson for your contract. She turned. Her face was different, thinner, like she hadn't been eating. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying. You can't challenge, she said. I already did. Valerian approved it. Lucien, I'm going to win. I'm going to take your contract. And then I'm going to find a way to break it. Blood servant contracts can't be broken. Then I'll find a way to make it not matter. She looked at me with something that might have been hope if hope looked that exhausted. Why are you doing this? Because you're mine, I said. Not Morgane's, mine. And I will not let you rot in this place because you were trying to save me from a choice I'd already made. I crossed the room, stood in front of her. I was going to ask you about the true love's bond, I said, the night you enslaved yourself. I was going to tell you about the ritual, the risk, the chance that we could both die or both survive. I was going to ask if you'd take that risk with me. Her eyes filled. But you didn't give me the chance, I said. You decided for both of us. You looked at the future, and you saw yourself aging and me staying young, and you thought that was the problem. But Talia, that was never the problem. I touched the collar, gently. The problem was always that you don't believe you're worth fighting for, that you're worth the risk, that you're worth the throne and the council and the old blood families and everything else I'd have to fight to keep you. I'm not worth that. You are to me. She closed her eyes, tears spilled. I don't want to be the thing you regret. You won't be. How do you know? Because I've already lived without you, I said. 22 years of it, and it was empty, and I will never regret choosing full over empty. She opened her eyes. What if you lose the combat? I won't. But what if then I'll find another way, and another after that? I will not stop until you're free. She looked at me for a long time. 3 days, she said finally. 3 days. And then I'm taking you home. I kissed her, soft, careful. The collar was between us, cold metal against my chest, a reminder of what she'd sacrificed and what I was going to take back. When I pulled away, she was crying properly now. I'm sorry, she whispered. I should have asked you. I should have let you choose. You're going to have a lifetime to make it up to me. Lucian, I mean it. We're going to have 50 years, 60, 70 if we're lucky, and I'm going to spend every single one of them reminding you that you were worth it. Footsteps in the hall, Victor's signal. Time was up. I kissed her once more. Quick. Hard. 3 days, I said again. 3 days. I left through the window, dropped to the garden below. Victor was waiting. Did you find her? Us? Yes. And I'm going to win that combat. You'll be fighting Cassius, Victor said. Morgane chose him as her champion. I smiled, not a warm smile. The smile of a man who'd just been given permission to hurt someone he'd wanted to hurt for weeks. Perfect. I watched from the servants' gallery. The combat arena was ancient. Stone, sand, torches. Lucian stood on one side, Cassius on the other. Valerian was officiating. He looked at both fighters. This is trial by combat, he said. Old law, the winner claims ownership of the blood servant contract currently held by House Crimson. The loser forfeits all claim. Do both fighters understand? Yes, Lucian said. Yes, Cassius said. Then begin. They moved. Cassius was faster than I expected. Older vampire. More experience. He struck first, caught Lucien across the jaw. Lucien's head snapped back. Blood. My blood went cold, but Lucien recovered. Struck back. Caught Cassius in the ribs. I heard the crack from the gallery. They circled each other. Cassius was smiling. You're going to lose, he said, and she's going to watch, and then she's going to serve my house for the rest of her pathetic human life. Lucian didn't answer. He moved. Faster than Cassius expected. Caught him by the throat. Slammed him into the ground. The arena shook. Cassius tried to get up. Lucien put his knee on Cassius's chest. Do you yield? Never. Lucien's hand tightened around his throat. I wasn't asking. He squeezed. Cassius's eyes went wide, panicked. Yield, Lucian said quietly, or I'll crush your throat and let you heal slowly. Cassius looked at Morgane. She was watching, cold, unmoved. He looked back at Lucian. I yield. Lucian released him, stood. Valerian stepped forward. The combat is concluded. Lucian Ravencroft is the victor. The blood servant contract transfers to him effective immediately. I felt it happen. The collar warmed, changed. The crimson crest faded, replaced by Ravencroft. I belong to Lucian now, legally, completely. He looked up at the gallery, found my eyes, and smiled. Not the controlled smile, not the political smile, the real one, the one that said we won. I smiled back. For the first time in 3 days, the thing behind my ribs flickered, not bright, but alive. I carried the contract back to the palace. Thalia walked beside me. free of Morgaine's house. Still collared, still bound, but mine now. What happens next, she said. Now we figure out how to break the contract. Blood servant contracts can't be broken. Then we'll find a loophole. Lucien, Thalia. I stopped, turned to face her. I didn't fight for you so I could own you. I fought for you so I could free you. There's a difference with the law doesn't care about the difference. Then we'll change the law. She looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had, but I'd already decided. The empire that let her father die unreported, that let Cassius bruise her throat, that let Morgaine collar her. That empire needed to change, and I was going to change it, starting with her. We reached the palace. Valerian was waiting. The contract, he said. I handed it to him. He read it. His face darkened. This is permanent. I know. There's no termination clause. No loophole. She's bound to you until she dies. I know. He looked at Talia, then at me. What are you going to do? I took a breath. I'm going to attempt the true love's bond. Silence. Lucien, Valerian said slowly, if you're wrong, I'm not wrong. If the bond fails, you both die. Well, I know. Then why, Because she deserves to choose, I said. Not the contract, not the collar, not the law, her. And I'm going to give her that choice, even if it kills me. I looked at Talia. What do you say? Do you want to risk death for forever? Or do you want to stay collared and safe? She looked at me for a long time. Then she took off the collar, dropped it on the floor. I choose you, she said quietly. Even if it kills me, I choose you. Behind my ribs, something that had been cold for 3 days started to warm. Then we do it tonight, I said. Valerian closed his eyes. God help you both. The ritual chamber was older than the palace itself. Stone carved with symbols I didn't recognize. A circle etched into the floor. Deep. Permanent. The kind of mark that gets made once and stays forever. Candles lined the walls, hundreds of them. Their light didn't flicker. Magic held them still, frozen flames casting frozen shadows. Valerian stood at the edge of the circle. Victor beside him. Witnesses, required by old law. My mother was there too. I hadn't expected that. She stood near the back, her face pale, her hands clasped so tight her knuckles were white. When I entered, she made a sound. Small. Broken. The sound of a mother watching her daughter walk towards something that might kill her. I wanted to go to her, offer, tell her it would be all right, but I didn't know if it would be. Lucien was already in the circle, waiting. He'd changed clothes, something formal, dark, the kind of thing you wear when you're either getting married or attending a funeral. I walked to him. The collar was gone. I'd thrown it away, but I could still feel where it had been, a ghost weight around my throat. Are you ready? He said quietly. No, he almost smiled. Good. If you were ready for this, I'd be worried. Valerian cleared his throat. The true love's bond is an ancient ritual, he said. His voice echoed off the stone. It has been attempted 17 times in recorded history. 12 times both participants died. 4 times only the vampire died. Once it succeeded. He looked at us. The ritual requires absolute commitment, absolute truth. If there is any doubt, any hesitation, any part of your love that is performance or hope or wishful thinking, the bond will know, and it will kill you both. We understand, Lucien said. Do you bind? Valerian stepped closer. Lucien, you will give up your immortality. All of it. You will become mortal. Being breakable. You will have perhaps 80 years left. Perhaps 90 if you're very lucky. You will never get it back. I know. Thalia, you will receive that immortality. But the transfer is violent. Your human body will try to reject it. The pain will be extraordinary. You may beg him to stop. If he stops, you both die. I swallowed. I understand. Then kneel, Valerian said. Face each other, hands together. We knelt. The stone was cold beneath my knees. Lucien's hands found mine. Warm, steady. I looked at his face. Memorized it. Just in case. Close your eyes, Valerian said. Both of you. We did. Lucien Ravencroft, do you offer your immortality freely without coercion, with full knowledge that you may not survive this night? I do. Thalia, daughter of Aldrich, do you accept his offering freely without coercion, with full knowledge that you may not survive this night? I do. Then begin. I felt Lucien move closer, his breath on my neck. I need you to know something, he whispered, before this starts. Lucien, whatever happens, I don't regret this. I don't regret you. If we die tonight, I die knowing I chose you every time. In every version of this story, I choose you. My eyes burned. I choose you too. Then it's already worked, he said against my skin. Everything after this is just details. He bit down. Pain, not the sharp kind, the deep kind, the kind that starts in your bones and radiates outward and until every nerve in your body is screaming. His teeth in my neck, his blood flowing into me. Hot, wrong, foreign. My body tried to reject it, tried to push it out, but it kept coming. More, more. Too much. I felt myself changing. My heart slowing, my lungs forgetting how to breathe. Human systems shutting down to make room for something else. Something that didn't belong. I wanted to scream, wanted to tell him to stop. But I'd made a promise, no hesitation, no doubt. So I held on and let him pour immortality into my dying body. I felt the exact moment his immortality left him. A shift, a lightness. 300 years of accumulated power draining out of him and into me. His heartbeat changed, became mortal, fragile, breakable. He was dying too. Both of us dying. The bond was failing. Then I heard her voice. Stop. My mother. Footsteps. Running. Someone entering the circle. Get out, Valerian shouted. You'll break the ritual. The ritual is already broken, she said. They're both dying. I can feel it. Vesper, there's nothing. Yes, there is. Another voice. Male, old, tired. Vesper, if I do this, I know what it costs. Help me anyway. Footsteps. 2 sets, coming closer. I felt hands on my shoulders. My mother's hands. Hold on, baby. Just hold on. Then another voice. The male voice, close to Lucian. This is going to hurt, boy, but it's the only way. I felt something change in the air. Magic. Old magic. The kind that tasted like copper and felt like gravity shifting. My mother's hands tightened on my shoulders. She started speaking. Words I didn't recognize. Old language. Ancient. Blood magic. The power in the circle doubled. Tripled. I felt it pouring into me and into Lucienne simultaneously. Not from each other. From somewhere else. From her. From the man helping her. They were completing the bond. Giving us what we were missing. The peace the ritual couldn't create on its own. Balance, the pain intensified. Worse than before. Worse than anything. I heard myself screaming, heard Lucienne screaming, heard my mother crying, and then silence. I opened my eyes. I was on the floor, flat on my back, staring at the ceiling. My body felt different, lighter, stronger, colder. I sat up slowly. Lucienne was beside me, also sitting up, also moving carefully. He looked at his hands, turned them over, examined them like they belonged to someone else. I can feel my heartbeat, he said quietly. It's slow, mortal. He looked at me. You're not breathing. I realized he was right. I wasn't breathing. I didn't need to. My heart had stopped. I was dead, but also alive. Vampire. I looked at my hands. They looked the same. But when I flexed my fingers, the movement was faster than it should have been. Sharper. Stronger. I turned to find my mother. She was on the floor 10 feet away, unconscious, pale. Beside her was a man I'd never seen before. Tall, dark hair, vampire, old vampire, the kind of old that had weight. He was on his knees, one hand on my mother's chest, keeping her breathing. Who are you? I said. My voice was different too, clearer. The man looked at me. My name is Damon, he said. Vesper stirred, her eyes opened, focused on Damon, then on me. Are you alive? I think so. Vampire. Yes. She closed her eyes as relief washed over her face. Good. Good. Demon helped her sit up. They looked at each other, 24 years of distance between them. Valerian was standing at the edge of the circle, staring at all of us like we'd just performed a miracle, which I suppose we had. It worked, he said. His voice was hoarse. The bond worked. He looked at my mother. How? Because we did it before, Vesper said quietly. 24 years ago, Demon and I attempted the true love's bond. We were both dying, but I was a blood witch, and Demon was my bridge. She looked at him. He gave me his immortality, and I gave him my mortality. I became vampire. He became mortal. I've been hiding for 24 years. But tonight, when I felt my daughter dying, I stopped hiding. Damon stood up, offered her his hand. She took it. And then Vesper did something I'd never seen her do. She smiled. Not the performer's smile. Not the mother's smile. The real one. I choose differently this time, she said. Demon pulled her close. It's about time. I could feel my mortality. It sat in my chest like a clock. Ticking. 80 years, maybe 90, no more, no less. I was breakable now. Thalia touched my face. How do you feel? She said. Mortal. I'm sorry. Don't be. I caught her hand, held it against my cheek. This is what I wanted. A lifetime with you. Not forever. Just a life. Valerian approached. The bond worked, he said, because Vesper and Demon provided the bridge. He turned to me. The council needs to know about this. If we're going to allow vampires to claim humans, we need to do it properly. With blood witches. With safeguards. Agreed, I said. He looked at Talia. You're a vampire now. Legally, you have rank. Blood. You can be claimed. She's already claimed, I said. Not by contract. By choice. I looked at Thalia. Will you marry me? She blinked. Now, yes. Now, before witnesses. I want everyone to know you're mine, not because I own you, because you chose me. Tears in her eyes. Yes, Valerian smiled. Then as reigning king of Nocturna, I pronounce you bound. By blood, by choice, by law. He looked at the room. The Empire has its first human-turned vampire queen. And the first proof that love is not a fairy tale. He paused. It's magic. The council met the next night. All of them, every vampire house, every noble, every elder who'd called me contamination. I stood before them wearing a dress Vesper had made. Simple, elegant, the kind of thing a queen would wear if she'd started as a servant and never forgotten. Lucian stood beside me, hand in mine. Valerian addressed the council. Last night we witnessed the impossible. The true love's bond, successfully completed. Thalia is now vampire. Lucien is now mortal. Both alive, both whole. Murmurs, shock. This changes everything, Valerian continued. For 300 years we have forbidden vampires from claiming humans because we feared creating thralls. He looked at me. Thalia is not a thrall. She is vampire with her humanity intact. How? Someone shouted. Blood magic, Valerian said. Old magic, performed by a blood witch, with a bridge to stabilize the bond. Blood magic is illegal. It was illegal, Valerian said. As of tonight, it's legal again, under strict supervision, with trained witches, for the specific purpose of completing true love's bonds. He pulled out a scroll. Section 4, reformed, effective immediately. Vampires may claim humans, but only through the true love's bond, only with a blood witch present, only if both parties consent, and only if they're willing to risk death to prove their love is real. He looked at the council. This is not a free pass. This is a test. If you're not willing to die for a human, you don't love them. You want them. There's a difference. Silence. Then one of the elders stood. And what of the blood servant contracts the humans already collared? Those contracts will be reviewed, Valerian said. Any human who wants freedom can petition the crown. If their claim is valid, the contract is dissolved. That will destroy the servant system. Good, Lucien said. Everyone turned to look at him. The servant system is built on the idea that human lives are worth less than vampire convenience, he said. It allowed my wife's father to die unreported. It allowed Lord Cassius to bruise her throat. It allowed House Crimson to collar her like an animal. His voice hardened. That system ends tonight. Humans can still work for vampires, but as employees, paid, protected, free to leave, not as property. An uproar, shouts, arguments. Valerian raised his hand. This is not a debate. This is a debate from your king. The reforms begin immediately. Any house that refuses to comply will lose their seat on this council. The room went silent. Are we clear? No one spoke. Good. Meeting adjourned. The nobles filed out, angry, confused, but compliant. Valerian looked at me. You just started a revolution. No, I said. I just asked to be treated like a person. A same thing, he said, and smiled. 30 years passed like water through fingers. Fast, inevitable, beautiful. Lucien aged. I watched it happen slowly. Gray in his hair at 35. Lines around his eyes at 40. A distinguished silver at 50. He looked mortal now. Fully mortal. And I looked the same. 22. Frozen. Eternal. People stared when we walked through the city. The aging king and his young queen. But I didn't care. Because every gray hair was a year we'd survived together. Every line was a laugh. A conversation. A choice we'd made to stay. We ruled. Reformed laws. Built schools for human children. created the Aldrich Foundation to investigate workplace deaths and hold houses accountable. My sister Astrid ran the foundation. She was brilliant, sharp, everything our father would have been proud of. Vesper and Damon married in the spring of our third year. A small ceremony, just family. She looked happy, actually happy. For the first time in my memory, my mother wasn't carrying the weight of regret. She and Damon had 60 years together. He died at 93, peacefully, in his sleep. She mourned him properly, loudly, completely. Then she came to live with us. Said she was tired of being alone. On my 52nd birthday, Lucien turned 72. He looked it now, old, fragile, still beautiful to me. We were in the garden, the one where he'd caught me in the rain 30 years ago. I need to tell you something, I said. He looked up from his book. Marcus Aurelius, the same copy I'd been reading the night we met. What is it? I pulled a vial from my pocket, small, glass, filled with dark liquid. Do you know what this is? He stared at it. Mortality potion. Yes. Thalia, I've been researching it for 5 years. It's real. It works. It reverses vampirism, makes you human again. Why would you? Because I don't want 500 years without you, I said quietly. I've watched you age, watched you slow down, and I've stayed the same, frozen at 22. I'm going to stay this way forever while you die, and then I'm going to be alone for centuries. I looked at the vial. I don't want that. I want to age with you. I want to have 20 years left, 30 if we're lucky. I want to grow old beside you and die knowing we lived a full life together. Lucien was crying. You'd give up immortality. I'd give up anything to not lose you before I'm ready. You'll never be ready. I know, but at least if I'm mortal, we'll go together, or close enough. He looked at the vial, at me. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. It can't be reversed. Once you take it, you're human again. Permanently. I know. You'll age, you'll get sick, you'll die. With you. He pulled me close. I don't deserve you. Yes, you do. You gave up immortality for me. I'm just returning the favor. I opened the vial, drank it. It tasted like copper and regret and the specific bitter flavor of choices that can't be undone. I felt it immediately, my heart starting, beating, stuttering at first, then finding rhythm, mortal rhythm, my lungs filling, breathing, the sudden desperate need for air, my body warming, blood moving, human blood. I was mortal again, breakable, temporary, alive. Lucien held me while the change finished. How do you feel? He whispered. Old, I said. He laughed. Welcome to the club. 20 years. We had 20 years as mortals together. I aged fast at first, the body trying to catch up to the years it had missed, 40s, 50s, 60s. Then it slowed, settled. We grew old together. Gray hair, weak knees, hands that shook in the mornings, all of it, and it was beautiful, because we did it together. Lucien died on a Tuesday. He was 92. I was 72. We were in bed, morning light through the window. He'd been sick for 3 months. His body finally giving up after 92 years of use. I was holding his hand. Thalia, he whispered, I'm here. I need to tell you something. Save your strength. No, listen. He squeezed my hand, weak, but there. I don't regret it, any of it. Not the throne I gave up, not the immortality, not the 60 years I could have had if I'd stayed vampire. Lucien, I got 70 years with you, he said. 70 years of Tuesdays, of you reading in corridors, of arguments about reform, of watching you change an empire. I got to see you become everything you were always meant to be. Tears on my face. And I got to grow old beside you. I got to wake up every morning and see you there. I got to hold your hand when it was young and when it was old. I got all of you, every version. His breathing was shallow now. That's more than forever, Thalia. That's a life. He closed his eyes. I love you. I love you too. See you soon. Soon, he smiled. And then he stopped breathing. 50 years after Lucien died, I stood in the museum, the Ravencroft Museum of Human Vampire Unity, built on the site of the old Scarlet Theater, where it all began. The main hall featured a portrait, massive, covering the entire wall. Lucien and Thalia, painted in their 50s, gray hair, laugh lines, holding hands, underneath a plaque. Lucien Ravencroft, vampire king who became mortal for love. Thalia Ravencroft, human servant who became vampire, then chose mortality to grow old with her husband. Together they reformed an empire and proved that love is stronger than time. Children stood in front of the portrait. Human children, vampire children, dhampir children, all learning together, all equal under the law. Because of them, the reforms they'd started had become permanent. Human vampire marriages were common now. Blood witches were respected, trained, licensed. The servant system was gone, replaced by employment contracts. Fair wages, protection. The empire had changed, not perfectly, not completely, but better, so much better. I walked through the museum, past exhibits on the True Love's Bond, on the council reforms, on the Aldrich Foundation, past a corridor reconstruction, stone ledge, oil lamp, a copy of Marcus Aurelius left open on the bench. Tourists sat there, took pictures, read the book. They didn't know this was where it happened, where a vampire prince met a human performer, where everything changed. I stopped in front of another exhibit, two collars behind glass, one silver, crimson house crest, one gold, Ravencroft crest, both broken. A sign explained Thalia Ravencroft wore these collars for a total of 4 days before her husband broke them and reformed the blood servant system. These collars are the last of their kind. I touched the glass, remembered the girl who'd worn them, fierce, brilliant, unbreakable. She'd changed the world by refusing to accept it as it was. And the man who'd loved her had helped, not by saving her, by fighting beside her. I left the museum as the sun was setting. The city looked different now. Humans and vampires walking together, working together, living together. Not perfectly. There were still problems, still prejudice, still houses that clung to the old ways. But better, always better, because two people had looked at an impossible future and said yes anyway, because they'd chosen love over safety, because they'd proved that some things are worth dying for, and even more worth living for. I walked through the garden, the same garden where Lucien had caught Thalia in the rain 70 years ago. The fountain worked now. Someone had finally fixed it. Water flowing, constant, eternal, like the story, like the legacy, like the truth they'd left behind. Love is not a fairy tale, it's work. It's choice, it's sacrifice, it's saying yes to forever, and then accepting that forever is just a lifetime, and making that lifetime count. I sat on a bench near the fountain and watched the water fall, and I thought about Tuesdays, about corridors, about a man who took a wrong turn and a woman who told him to try reading something with words in it, about how the smallest moments become the biggest stories, about how two people can change an empire just by refusing to let go of each other. The sun set, the city lit up. Nocturna, the vampire capital, built on 300 years of darkness, now learning to love the dawn, because they'd shown us how. And somewhere I like to think they were watching, together, the way they'd always been, the way they'd always be. Forever might be impossible, but a lifetime is everything. The Tuesday chair sat in a museum now, preserved, protected, behind velvet ropes. But once a week they let children sit in it, human children, vampire children. They sat and someone read them the story. About a girl and a prince, about a love that changed the world, about choosing each other. Every time, the children asked questions. Did they really love each other? Yes. Did they really give up forever? Yes. Was it worth it? The guide always smiled at that one. They thought so. Every Tuesday for 70 years they thought so. The children would nod, solemn, understanding something they wouldn't fully grasp until they were older, until they loved someone, until they had to choose between safe and right, between easy and worth it, between the fairy tale and the real thing. And when they made that choice, when they stood at the edge of the impossible and said yes anyway, they would remember. The girl who read philosophy in a corridor, the prince who took a wrong turn, the moment it became too late, and how too late was exactly the right time. Because some things can't be stopped once they start. Some things are meant to be inevitable. Some doors once opened were never meant to close. And some loves are worth everything, even time, even forever, even the last dawn.